Hello again. This is one of the talks again about the progression of a stand through its life. We've talked about stand initiation stage now, and we've talked about stem exclusion stage for a single cohort. In other words, all coming up at the same time. Now we're going to mix it up a bit and look at stem exclusion stage with mixed species stands. And this is typical for more of southern Ontario, so that's what we're going to be checking out today. So what we want to do is look at that. Keep in mind one thing that for sure is that all species have roughly the same requirements to survive, and as has been mentioned in different labs and lectures, is that, for example, black spruce don't love to grow in wet spots, but they are able to survive there where other trees can't. And the limiting factor is what makes trees survive. So whatever is limiting, if some trees can take, let's say, there's a very limited amount of water in the area, and they can make maximum use of it, like jack pine, or minimal amount of sun, like maple syrup, like maple trees, then all this response is that the trees can make effective use to eventually grow into mature trees. It's all about survival. So here we go. So this is a stand, and this particular stand, what we're going to be looking at is all the different stratum. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is that if you look at it, we have one, the forest has a very, if you look at those trees, they're the forest floor stratum. Okay, so these are the ones that are just coming out, and then we can, and these are part of the understory. All right, so this is part of the understory, and then the next part of the stratum is the taller trees in here, and these guys here are all the trees which are coming up underneath, very shade tolerant, but they are again in the what we're going to call the C stratum. And then we have the next tree, so these are your classical understory trees. And then we have above that, okay, let's see if I can, I'll just leave it yellow. So then the next stratum in the overstory is this one here, and this is your codominant, dominant trees and intermediate trees, and even suppressed trees. So that's, so you can, and then the final stratum are these emergent or super canopy trees, as we call them in Ontario. So there's a variety of levels in these complex stands, and what has been shown over time is that, okay, cancel this thought. Sorry about that. I was answering the phone. So anyways, so then the key thing is that the lower strata trees will grow up into higher strata if they have, the key thing is slow but steady height growth and strong epinastic control. Now there is a new word that you may want to consider, and that strong epinastic control. What that means is that the trees have very much that the trees' entire growth is upward instead of just out everywhere. For example, a spruce, a poplar, their growth is very much in a vertical way, while red maple, oak, sugar maple, basswood, they grow outwards in all directions at the same time. So trees with strong epinastic control are going to have success getting through all those barriers along the way to eventually become up into this dominant position. So some incorrect assumptions that are made along the way is that the lower strata, in regards to the lower strata trees, a lot of people think just because they're in the understory, the trees are younger. Wrong. A lot of them could be just suppressed, or trees which are just able to survive, like a maple. Okay. Another idea is that these lower strata trees have initiated beneath the canopy of the higher strata. In other words, they started there. Wrong again. This could have been, these trees just may have been outcompeted at the stand initiation stage. And then the most common error is that the trees below will always replace the overstory. That may not be the case. It can happen, but evidence shows that it's not always the case that a tree in the lower strata will eventually become into the upper strata. It is not that simple. Okay, so this is a scenario done out of the book Forest Dynamics, and this scenario here, it's scenario 1. What we want to look at here is we're going to look at 3 species, and here they have northern red oak, black birch, red maple. And just for the sake of our thinking, our talk here is that black birch is very close to yellow birch. So we're going to just pretend when you see black birch is actually yellow birch, Betula alleganiensis. So what's interesting about this here, in this case, in this example here, when you look at the axis, so this is here reflects the age of the stand up to 60 years, okay, and here is the tree height, and up to, again here it's an imperial, up to 75 feet. Now all 3 trees were established at the same time, and what happened was that they all started growing the same way. But then what happened is that the northern red oak continued growing on a steady pace on that particular site. So it grew at this rate, while the black birch or yellow birch grew at this rate, and then the red maple grew at even a lower rate. So in other words, they got a lower height. At 60 years, there was a lower height to the red maple as compared to the black birch, and the black birch as compared to the red oak. So when you look at the stand, if you walked into the stand here and you said, oh look, right, you would look at that stand and you would say, looks like the red oak got established, and then the black birch or yellow birch and the red maple established after the fact. So this is an example where this is just not the case. They all started almost on the same day, but because of different growth rates, one species took over from the others. Now, why would we like that approach? And again, first of all, as you can see here, the Betula and the Acer slow in height and diameter growth are assumed to be younger than the Quercus. Very wrong. Okay. Now the other point to consider at the same time here is this: why would people prefer to have the growth of the trees, these trees combined? Well, here's an interesting one, more of a silviculture thing, but needs to be noted. The advantages of this type of mixed stand is the Acer and the Betula trees cause the Quercus, the oak, to prune their branches as they move to the B stratum, okay, to the higher level. An effective way to have clear oak wood at good spacing without costly thinnings. In other words, the other trees are creating the oak to prune itself. It's called self-pruning. That's what we call that in forestry. All right. So that just gives you an example of how we look at stands in a different way. So in here, this was again another example where in 1911 the forest was initiated, and as it grew, you can see here how the trees were in clumps and scattered, and it didn't look really much like a forest. And then in about 30 years, the forest started getting more established, and the oaks started becoming dominant. And let's jump to 1971 and look at that. It looks like it was an oak forest with an understory of, or lower intermediate trees of yellow birch and maple. Not so. So it's kind of interesting how you can perceive these type of forests as one thing and then actually something else totally occurred. Okay, and this is we've just discussed all this. So now, here, tulip tree, which grows in southern Ontario. This is just again one here where we have tulip tree, or yellow poplar as it's called also. And it's interesting, here in 1870, wow, that goes back a ways, they planted a bunch of white oak, okay? And you can see how it tracks along over time. And then they planted, year probably 1900s, they planted oak again and tulip tree. And then what happened is, let's just jump to now, 1980, or not now, but 20 years ago. You can see what they see is that you see this, the result of this, you see after all that time, you see a yellow poplar, in other words tulip tree, dominating the site, with the oaks being in a co-dominant position. Again, you look at the planting and the way the trees grew, that the tulip trees were capable of outgrowing the older oak trees if sufficient light was available, and that was the case here. So it gets complex when you get into a variety of rates of growth. For scenario number 2 here, what species is represented by each type of tree? And we've done this in the lecture series, and I'm going to let you think about that. And again, hint is tolerance, and look at what trees are located in the understory and address this question. So give that a thought, and look at the trees in the overstory and the understory to conclude what species might exist. Okay, and same goes for this one. And you can see here the complexity, what trees could be these Ds in the lower stratum, and you can guess that balsam fir would be a good guess here for this type of species. Whoops, I didn't want to go that fast. Okay, so here in this little scenario, we have the original forest here. Okay, so this is the original forest, and the clear trees that look like these are supposed to be black spruce. The dashed tree is poplar, so that's a poplar. Okay, and what else do we got here? The diagonal line is jack pine, so that's jack pine. Okay, so now when we look at it, the forest is cut, and suddenly over the first 10 years, we see the dash line, which is, we have poplars, but we have alder, which are overtopping these trees. So very small trees, but they are overtopping, and we have a few jack pine coming in. Also, lots of light. Then another 10 years, 15, 20 years go by, and look what happens to the alder. It's getting squeezed out. It's starting to become an intermediate, or if not suppressed type of tree, as the poplars start to take off, the jack pine are taking off, and now we have some good height. Meanwhile, what's happening is we're seeing some jack pine being squeezed out because of their tolerance, but in the understory, black spruce is starting to occur because they're very, very tolerant. So, and then you add another 40 years, and now what you have is lots of big poplars being squeezed out as the jack pine, which gets sufficient light, get very large, but meanwhile the black spruce become a component in the intermediate and even co-dominant positions. So this is how a stand, so the stand here is quite different than the stand that was originally harvested up here. So this gives you an idea of how things can change over time. So this is another scenario. In this scenario, we have, these are white birch. These are the ones with the horizontal lines. Okay, let me see if I can get this. Okay, the pin cherry are these guys here, and then we have the clear softwoods, okay, which are like this is white pine, and spotted is butternut. So over time, what can happen in this situation is that the white birch comes up quickly, takes over the pin cherry, squeezes out the pin cherry, and the white pine come in along the way. And that is pretty well gives you some of the scenarios we want to address for mixed woods. Lots of variety, and you have to understand the sylvics of each one and its position in the stratum.